Welcome back to their episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by Wil Schroter, the startups.com founder and CEO. Will, as we are looking to find our way around the next bend and over the next hill and hit the next revenue milestone, once we hit that, then everything's okay, right? Like we just get there and then all the bills will be paid, everybody will be happy, and then it's just Shangri-La, right?
Yeah, it's just that easy. Hey, Ryan, once you and I find wives and we get married, everything's fine. We have no problems after that. Once we have kids, everything's fine. No problems after.
I see where you're going with this. You're saying with each new milestone comes an interesting, new, delightful set of challenges.
Oh my God. I know you probably share this, but when we were early in our careers, remember thinking if we just got to that next revenue milestone, or maybe if we just got an investor, it would take care of all these problems we've got, and then everything will be fine.
If we had 5,000 in MRR, everything will just become simple from there. It'll be all the dry powder we'll ever need. Will grow endlessly based on that foundation.
And I remember those milestones so specifically, because I was like, man, if I can just pay Jason, our creative director, $1,000 a month, we're golden. This thing is on a rocket ship, right? And we were all in college at the time, so that was all the money in the world. And I remember just spending every night pining over those milestones, right? Being like, okay, if we get this one client and they'll pay us $500 every single month, this will be the game changer that we need. And I'll be able to pay my $250 a month of rent. Even idea how long ago that was. And I think about that. And as the years progressed, it felt like I was running this marathon, and it was always like that. The end game, the finish line was just beyond my sight. And every time I was just about to cross it, somebody moved it 10 miles away.
Oh yeah, right after you do the lean, the victory lean, you're I'm gonna break through it early, and then all of a sudden it's another 100 yards down, and you're like, but I just used all the energy I had left, and I timed it so that I would get there before I died, and now it's further away again. It is funny too, and it is funny how much those scale and how fast, right? You go from needing that $250 for rent. I remember it was we got to get from 5,000 to 6,000 in monthly revenue so that we can pay Mikey.
Yep, exactly, right?
A systems administrator, right? We needed Mikey. We had to pay Mikey, and Mikey wanted $1,000 a month to work out of my college apartment, and so we had to go from 5 to 6. We had to get there, right? And then everything would be easy.
I think the premise is broken in two ways. And that's what I'd love to talk about today. I think the first way that it's broken is that we always think in terms of a vacuum. We think if we hit this milestone, then everything else kind of just stops. Again, it's the analogy I used at the beginning when we were saying, hey, if we just get married, if we just have kids. The second part is we don't realize what new sets of challenges become exponentially bigger and way harder than what we have now, right? Because in our minds, hey, if we just get more money, we'll get this fixed. And I'll give one other example. This will just apply to everybody. When I was in college, the job that I had at the time was paying $5 an hour. Right. This is during the Napoleonic era.
Fancy money. Yeah.
And
paid
I remember,
in Buffalo nickels.
Yeah, in Buffalo. In silk. I remember I was applying for a job that would pay $10 an hour. And in my mind, if I could get that job, I'm golden. I literally never need another job again.
Yeah. Double my income. Yep. I'm good.
And I didn't get that job because I'm an idiot. Right. I wasn't qualified for that job. Right. Oh, by the way, side note, I'll never forget what that job was, and I wanted it so badly. It was the specialty speaker salesperson at Best Buy for Bose in-store sales. And I was a huge Bose fan at the time, the speaker fan, and I wanted that job more than anything. I'm a total audiophile.
You just wanted to hang out back in that special AV room with the leather couches they used to have?
Honestly, dare to dream. And so I remember how heartbroken I was when I didn't get that. Anyway, point is, I thought if I could hit that milestone, I'd be on easy street. It isn't funny that in life, every time we think there's just that one milestone that's all it takes, out comes another one. But in this particular case, in particular to startups, it's not just one. It's lots. Every time we unlock that next level of revenue, it brings with it exponentially more new problems, and then those new problems become exponentially harder to solve. It's a game where the levels keep getting harder as we go, and we keep thinking it's the last level.
Yeah. It's like you want to increase your chess ranking. Well, good news. Now your chess ranking went up. Now you have to play people who are way better than you are again and again and again, right? It just keeps going up. And I think we don't take that into account, right? And it's kind of the point I was making before. There's so many times that I can think of in my own history where I absolutely exhausted myself to hit that milestone, thinking that then there would be the victory walking lap, right? I would just kind of, walk the bases or whatever. I hit the grand slam, I would walk the bases. You don't get to do that, right? There's no rest afterwards. And there were so many times where like I didn't pace myself appropriately, hit that milestone thinking that everything's going to be smooth sailing after that, only to find out that we'd hit the roughest seas to date, right? Just sort of keeps happening over and over and over again.
And here's the thing. Early in my career, I didn't get it. And that's why I'm hoping that two different folks that listen to this podcast, folks that are just getting into this business for the first time, and they're listening to this going, wait, hold on, what? Right? And then folks that are old pros that are like, yep,
that happened.
Much exactly how it goes. And so I think both sides could appreciate this journey. Early in my career, in those early days where I'm just starting the agency, and we're trying to get $1,000 of recurring revenue every month, retainer revenue. That's all it took. And at that time, that would cover all my expenses. That would cover whatever I was paying people, whatever I was going. Well, as you recall, I've told the story before, the agency grew incredibly quickly. We had one of the largest agency wins in history, like one of the most largest landscape, $250 million win.
Do you remember how those targets moved? Can you go back in time and like...
Yeah, okay, that's it. And here we go, right? Now, if I were to tell anyone, right, that you could go from zero to those kinds of numbers in the course of just a few years, they would be like, everything must be perfect. And I got to tell you, man, everything was far from perfect. In fact, when we grew, as our payroll went from, let's call it $1,000 a month to like $10 million a month, not an exaggeration, $10 million a month.
Say that again so it doesn't sound like a verbal typo. $10 million a month. Yeah, that's quite a payroll swing.
Right. And so as those numbers started to add up, and by the way, it's kind of fun, just like anachronism. Back then, you actually had to sign everyone's paycheck. It was like a real thing, right? And so it was just this really like tactile experience. This is like so old school, where like someone would come in, someone from like accounts payable, and they would hand you this giant, stack of checks that you had to sign. And this is such an old school business owner thing where you'd go by each one. And Ryan, like I would sit there and be like, what's this guy getting paid? Seriously? It's like they have this like mental math every time.
It's funny, but there's actually something to that, man. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about this, like when we used to have to plug all of our expenses into an accounting system where it wasn't just automatically imported, or you literally had to pay attention to everything. You were a lot more careful about your expenses, right? You had a lot better sense for what was coming in and what was going out. Just because, like to your point, it's a tactile experience, right? I remember like literally taking boxes of receipts and plugging them into an accounting system at the end of the month because that was how you did it. Half the stuff was bought in cash.
It was real work, and kind of the physical work kind of like felt like the real world work, right? Of what you were doing. And also back then, I would hand people their paychecks every 2 weeks, right? Like it was a very like reward based, like, thank you for doing your job kind of thing. And obviously all that's lost. Now that said, as I'm watching these literal stacks get bigger, right? Like bigger, the stacks of checks being signed, this weight starts to fall on me, right? Now, also, Ryan, when you hand someone their paycheck, they kind of expect you to hand another one in 2 weeks, right? There's also like, you can visualize the weight of what's happening.
The weight of when it doesn't happen too, right? Like, if somebody's paycheck doesn't hit now, they're like, hey, was there a problem with the payroll system? Like, doesn't look like my direct deposit went through today, right? As opposed to they're standing there in front of you with their hand out and you're like, so gang, some strange news. The pressure of that was significantly different.
Just sticking with this for a second, because I just thought like this whole world and comeuppance was fascinating. And I was really young at the time. I was like 25. So like, I didn't understand how the world worked either. So like, I would hand a guy who's like 40, which is ironic because it's way younger than I am now. I'd hand a guy who's 40, and I thought he was 400,000 years old. I'd hand a guy with 40 his paycheck, and he'd make some mention just because we had a moment, to interact. Like, hey, my daughter's heading off to school, college or whatever, and this is going to be a huge help. And I remember having those kind of like how it's going to be spent, how this is helping out, whatever. And while they're being thankful, the way I processed it was, oh shit, I got to make sure your kid goes to college now too.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Knowing what people are doing, knowing what's at stake, and especially as that scales, right? It's one of those things we don't really think about, but the pressure around that responsibility scales with revenue, with team size, with all these things that, we were trying to do. You're simultaneously creating these other vectors for risk and just all kinds of downside, right?
Also, as these problems escalate, I always used to call them the weight of more zeros, right? The weight of more zeros on these problems. You're thinking, oh, well, we have more revenue, we can fix them. No, think of like, I'm talking to our audience here. Think of like the revenue and the expenses as two totally separate things, meaning revenue can come and go all the time. Expenses never go anywhere, right? and people are like, oh, well, you can let go of people. Nah, try it, right? It's not quite as clean and easy as anyone thinks it is. It sucks, and most people don't do it, which is, a whole other issue. But my point is, as those numbers went up, I would argue that it was easy. It was working out easy to get to those bigger revenue numbers. But once those debt numbers started to those liabilities started to rack up with it, an escalation you immediately see the day you take that check where you raise capital, right? It happens to everybody. Just raised a bunch of money, hired a bunch of people, signed office leases. If people still do that, whatever, right? And all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, geez, I have like $300,000 a month of liabilities. Like, if this contract doesn't go through, if we don't hit MRR goals, the hell am I going to pay that?
Yeah, and there's another side of that one where we're taking on cash. That happens really fast, right? In the case of growth across milestones, where it's incremental linear growth, very different than when it just all of a sudden comes in overnight. And now we're responsible for marshaling that cash into growth, and we have to do all of those things in a very, very short period of time. It's significantly harder to absorb the impact of that, and even just to make sense of it, right? Like when your headcount grows from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 100 over a period of 5 years in slow growth, you understand how to, you can kind of feel it happening. When you go from 10 to 50 people or 50 to 150 people because you just raised $7.5 million on your Series A, big difference, right? The speed of that change has a huge impact on your ability to process it.
Also, your ability to make moves, right? It was just a few of us in a room. We actually had a tremendous amount of optionality that we weren't quite aware of at the time, right? We could make moves that could fail. Right now, you could look at it and say, yeah, but if you have money, you can make more of those moves because if they don't work out, you got some money in the bank. You do. That's true. For a minute.
Yeah.
So you spend it, right? And,
well, let's go back. It's a complexity issue, right? Like go back to your analog with the family, right? Used to be really simple for my wife and I to decide where we wanted to go for dinner, right?
Yep.
Got a lot harder once there was a baby involved.
Yep.
Got a lot harder when there were two. And now it's nearly impossible to make everybody happy that there are three of them, right? And so like you lose that flexibility, that nimbleness, that ease and rapidity of decision-making and action, the bigger and bigger you get, right? So I think it's a really important point you're making, which is not only do the decisions get more complicated themselves, taking action on them once you even do decide what to do becomes vastly more complicated as well.
Let's talk about that. I call these new nodes of problems, okay? So essentially what that looks like is initially right now it's just you and I, right? Back to back kind of kung fu fighting it out of this problem, right? We raised some money or we grew the business in some way from a revenue standpoint. We had some money to spend. We hired a bunch of new people. Let's say we hired 5, right? We're not even getting crazy. We hired 5 new people, okay? Because we're thinking when we hire those people, now someone can build more product. Now someone can do more marketing. Now someone can do more sales. So, whatever they're doing, right? Back office, whatever it takes. And at the time, all we're thinking is that doesn't exist. So money solves that problem. So that problem goes away. What we're totally missing when we say that is, okay, but now we have a new human, right? And humans are fountains of problems, all of us, right? Like it's not any one person, right?
There was no problem node in my house of somebody writing on the couch with permanent marker until I had a child, right? That wasn't a problem node. That didn't exist. We didn't have to solve for that problem back in the day. Now we do.
100%. And so now think of how many problem nodes, okay, seeds we plant that are going to harvest on their own, all right? 5 seconds ago, when you and I needed to make a decision, we just made it. right? We're good. Now we took on investment. Now we've got a board that doesn't allow us to just do what we do. Not because they're bad people that, it says anti-investor, just the way it works, right? You sign up for that liability. Now we're like, oh, we have money, but now we have a bunch of liabilities, like paying that back, that didn't exist 5 minutes ago and that are frankly with us forever. Now fast forward that a little bit more. Now we've hired these 5 people. Every one of those people has their own personalities. They have their own biases. They have their own agendas. They have, whatever. Now all of a sudden, part of what we spend our day on is making sure that person A and person B are getting along well, right? Now we have to make sure our culture is working for everybody, right? Now we have to make sure that whatever decisions that we make or what we want to do in the business are kosher with everybody else.
Something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it.
I remember that point distinctly. It was, I hired like the second and third developer and another salesperson. And I think it took the head count to like right around 13, 14 plus me, 14, 15, something like that. And that felt like such a great milestone because all of a sudden we were going to be able to absorb some additional client work that we had started saying no to from an existing client base. And we were going to be able to recognize that revenue is going to be great. And then the complexity of managing that work across multiple people where there had only been, ones and twos before, now there were threes and fours and fives. All of a sudden now, my time was largely spent wrangling those people, dealing with just interpersonal issues, team issues, but even just workflow issues. And so all of a sudden then it didn't work out the way you think it would, right? Okay, now we add more people. The clients are going to ask us for the work. I can scope the work. Candidates as well. Now I don't have that time to scope the work because I'm dealing with the people who are supposed to be doing the work, right? It's all these crazy little things that end up cropping up. And so like I every time, like I'd be curious to get your number on this one, but for me, whatever I thought the kind of the increase in throughput or gain was going to be from any given milestone, it was typically somewhere between -5 and maximum like positive 25%, right? What my expectation was.
How about this? What happens is as we get these gains, we go from, and we've talked about this before, we go from externally focused to internally focused, right? Well, again, it was just you and I. We can kind of we don't need to focus on. We just focus everything externally. Building product, finding sales. Yeah.
You look that way, I'll look this way, and we'll have everything covered. That's it.
Yeah, pretty much it, right? As we grow, as we get more revenue, more money coming in, now a bigger and bigger and bigger slice of our time is internally focused, right? And that is wildly distracting. I mean, I got to a point, I'll never forget like these 2 specific milestones as we were growing that first company. I got to a point where I was in management meetings about upcoming management meetings. And I'm like, dude, what the hell, right? Like, weren't we an agency?
How much do we get paid for these? How much money do we make when we're doing these? Exactly.
And I distinctly remember like a year into our board meetings, we had, this is a different time, we had 7 a.m. Board meetings every Friday, right? So in-person board meetings, right? And I don't know whose idea that was. Anyway, I'd show up and we'd talk about, staffing plans, accounts receivable, like, work in progress, all these things that agencies talk about. And I remember like a year into it, I was like, hey guys, I just want to point out, has anyone noticed that we haven't talked a single thing about any of the work we actually do? Like our client work, our creative, like, awards that we would get, things like that, just like things that relate to what we actually do, right? Everything was about staffing plans, culture, like our entire focus became internal. And that was the cost of our growth. Right? It's something like we're all trying to get to, but we don't realize the weight and the cost of that growth.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The amount of inefficiencies that are created, and some of them absolutely necessary, right? Like we can't not have meetings. Sometimes we even have to have meetings about meetings. I don't think that, some of those things, sure, we could talk about, eliminating some of that stuff. But I think the bigger point here is that you just need to be aware that it's coming, right? You need to be eyes wide open. as you round that next bend, it doesn't open up into the pasture of Shangri-La where you just harvest fruit all day long, eat and lay around, right? There's going to be new problems there too, right? And I think that's the real issue.
When I was growing up, I didn't have any money. And I remember rich people being like, money's not that important. There's more important things. I was like, fuck you. It's because you have it. I was like, and so I want to run not quite a counterpoint, but I want to address that point. Okay, it's like Will and Ryan talking about, they had all this money and and they had problems with it. I think I'd rather have the money and have the problems.
They're high quality problems. Yes.
Yes, I get that. Let's address that. Okay. So yes, we'd rather have the money. Okay. This isn't saying income is bad, right? This is definitely not saying that.
Yeah. Ryan and Will just explained to us that if we just cut off all of our sales and stop growing and have no revenue, that life will become far easier, right? If that's what you heard, rewind a bit and check it out again, because that's definitely not what we're saying here.
Definitely not what we're saying, right? Income good, right? Investment good. What we're saying is what comes with that is highly problematic, right? It is, again, we look at it going, oh, it solves the problem we have right now, which can't pay for X. But once you've paid for that, and now you look at all of the things that come with it, it is exponentially harder and harder to fix, right? Like when I knew my only problem was I needed $1,000, it was a legitimate problem. It was an existential problem in the most specific sense. However, if I got that $1,000, and I didn't create more liabilities, my life was way better, right? Now let's talk about that. Let's talk about the part where we get the income, we get the investment, and we rush to create liabilities. Here is what future Will and Ryan, Back to the Future style, would have said to younger Will and Ryan: pump the brakes, dude. Pump the brakes, right?
Yeah, and it's in that moment that we have to kind of take that pause and say, like, look, slow down a bit, right? Like, let's make sure that as we approach these milestones and as we're thinking through these things that we want to accomplish, let's be very clear on what the likely problems that we're going to inherit with those are, and whether we're ready to tackle those or not. There are definitely times where I remember we've talked about, growth for the sake of growth. And I think that's one of those challenges where when we're just continuously in growth mode, we're just talking about scale, endless scale, endless scale, endless scale. We're not talking about the fact that our problems scale right along with that. And we're not planning and preparing for that. We're planning for all the good stuff that comes with it, more revenue, more flexibility, theoretically, until you realize that you're creating a whole host of intertwined problems that become harder to untangle, right? Again, to your point, when you got one problem and it's $1,000 problem, not that hard to solve. If you have 1,000 problems that are all $1,000 problem, a lot harder to solve. You have 2 problems that are $500,000 problems, a lot harder to solve, right? So I think that we have to be really, really careful as we approach this and say, like, look, what are the problems that I really do need to be focused on and worried about right now? And what are the things that I need to try to accomplish right now? And what can just get kicked down the lane for a later time? What can I address at a later point, right? Whether that's growth or challenges around revenue growth, hiring growth. There's all these things that I think we get really caught up in trying to push things often faster than we need to, right? I don't know if you went through that, but I remember at the early stage of the agency, there were some points where, like, I definitely got way ahead of my skis because I felt like it would make us grow faster, and it did, right? But it didn't help us grow profitably. It didn't help us grow stably, right? It created all kinds of new problems just because of the way I went about it.
You bet. And there's always someone that will take your money, right? You've accomplished nothing, right? Ryan, you and I were talking about ad budgets the other day. Like, if we were to say, hey, we're willing to spend more money, congrats, right?
Yes, exactly.
AdWords will take as much as you have.
As much as you want.
Yeah. The casino has no problem with your money.
Zero.
Or hiring more people. Like, we're staffing up, and right, are you making more money? Because just spending money on people isn't an accomplishment, right? It's what they do. That's the accomplishment.
Oh man, I know. I have to tell people this all the time. It's like you realize what you just told me is you're accepting a bunch of new liability. You're like, well, but they're going to be able to do stuff too. I was like, well, here's the thing. Maybe, right? There's a certainty in this equation, and there's a massive uncertainty. The certainty here is that you will pay them. The uncertainty is whether that will pay you back in any way. That's the challenge here.
I remember having this conversation at a lunch in Malibu, of all places, with David Hannemeyer Hansen from Basecamp, right? And this is a few years back, but and And I remember sitting across from him and I was like, David, where are you guys at headcount and stuff like that? And just trying to get an idea where he was at those days. And he's like, I don't remember what the number was. He was like we're at like 42 people. And I was like, okay, yeah. Are you guys, adding people or what's the plan? And he's like, no. And he wasn't like, he's like, how dare you ask, right? And he's like, of course we're not adding people. And what I loved about it, and I kind of loved their style.
What do you think? I'm a failure, Will? You think I need more people?
I know, essentially, it's at a time when that was just not an answer you heard, right? So I just
no, because head count was like that was the stat that everyone was brandishing. Oh, we just added our 500th person. Condolences. Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly, right. But I remember him saying it so stoically, and he said, "Look, we have all the people we need. If at this point we want to grow the business, it can't come at the expense of adding more liability, right? Otherwise, it's not worth doing." And I remember thinking, that just makes tons of sense.
Yeah, damn.
I'm so not used to hearing that. And again, that was years ago. And I fast forward to today, and I feel like that advice could not be more prescient, right? And I know that those guys stick to that same, tactic now, where I remember Jason Fried wrote, this is a long time ago, he's like, look, we make enough revenue where we could have hundreds and hundreds of people, but we don't need them.
Don't need them, right? Why would we do that?
I go back to, why don't we hear this more often? Why don't we hear more often like, hey, the goal is to grow revenue as fast as we can and then get it to the point where we're not growing liabilities anymore. But you never hear that.
You don't, because people don't plan for it, right? They're because again, they're not considering the fact that increasing revenue does also mean increasing liabilities, increasing your nodes, your vectors for potential problems. And so I think that at some point, like look at the early stages, there are times where we do kind of have to throw gas in the fire and hope for the best. But we have to stop that at some point. I think that's where a lot of startups get into trouble, is that they don't get to that point where they realize like, hey, let's maximize the delta between any increase in revenue we have and the increase in liabilities, rather than just simply saying, make the decision that maximizes revenue without thinking about what the potential liabilities are. And I think a lot of us get into trouble by doing exactly that.
I just think that narrative, while it sounds sweet, spend money to make money, all this like bullshit stuff, it sounds like it should make sense. But you have folks like David and Jason who are like, yeah, that actually doesn't make any sense. Why is no one else doing this math?
Nobody else. Yeah. You have to make money to make money. I think that's how that works.
Imagine that. And it's like, there's this whole other like bastion of founders that aren't in the startup space as we know it. And they just look at things logically and they're like, yeah, the goal is to just make more money. Like, how do you guys not understand that? Right. And they're not wrong.
Yeah, right. I need to buy low, sell high, sell for more than what it costs you. Do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere we've gone astray on the calculation. Somewhere we've gone astray on the let me create massive amounts of liability and the tiny % chance that it might become something, when I could have just said, how about I just make money?
Yeah, just make money consistently, month over month, year over year, decade over decade, and end up in a better place, right?
Yeah, I'm saying, we talk about this all the time, right? You just don't hear enough startups. I'm not saying there's none. You don't hear enough startups, the founders, say, yeah, the goal is to build a $3 million business that throws off $1 million a year. Right? Yeah. That's all I need. That is all the money that I need. And that is the highest and most likely outcome that I can achieve.
Yeah, man. Talk about this all the time. We did a whole podcast on this, right? Which was not just looking at the size of the outcome, but the probability, right? So if there's a minuscule probability that you end up with a $100 million business, or a higher likelihood, certainly higher, right, that we end up with a $3, $5, $10 million business, multiply those two numbers together, multiply the percentage chance by the total that you're aiming for, and tell me which one ends up looking better, right? The challenge is that to get to those really, really high numbers, because of the way liability stack, because of the way that all the problem nodes are created, because of the challenges of ever getting there in the first place, the chances are so damn small that when you do that math, you realize you're far better off to just build something stable, profitably growing, cash flowing, at least to the point where you truly can understand and create specific deltas between that increase in revenue and that increase in liability, right? I think we get so used to uncertainty at the early stages of startups that we just start to accept that it's going to exist forever. And there are certainly points where we could and should just stamp out that uncertainty, and we don't. We just say like, well, we just always grow some and then we see what happens in terms of what it ends up costing us. Like, well, how about no? At some point, let's just stop doing that.
If we ever want to get off of this hamster wheel, we have to deliberately say, hey, this next milestone that we're going to get to, that's the milestone. We're not just going to keep feeding the beast with more liabilities. At some point, the goal we're trying to get to, that revenue milestone, that lifestyle milestone, etc., needs to get locked in so we can actually enjoy and harvest that goal and not just be a factory of liabilities that we're constantly putting in front of us, right, that we have to keep chasing. So all we're saying, all Ryan and I are saying here is, if what you're going to do is build this business, have an end game in mind, have that dollar figure in mind, and when you get there, stop. Stop and go enjoy your business.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the startups.com community. Check out the startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.